Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. And this is the fourth and last year that I will appear before you as the president of FAPAE. It's the time to see what the balance sheet is like and to talk about the future of FAPAE. That's why I have to tell you with uncertain pudor some of the stories that I've had to live through over the last 4 years. I must tell you that I have gone through 4 years with very good moments, and the balance at the end of the day, I think, has been worthwhile. However, I want FAPAE to continue to be alive, because my greatest wish is for FAPAE to continue to be the interlocutor and spokesperson for all of those people who like film, television, and who want to live and make a living from film and television, with film and television. But film and television are not only figures on a balance sheet. I think it's much more. And this is expression, it's culture, and it is identity. Someone said that give me a bit of support and I will raise the world. I said, well, give me a language, give me some stories, and we'll set up a world. We will set up and build a culture. After 4 years of being in FAPAE, I've asked myself a lot of questions, and I'm obliged to launch them, so to speak, into the air in order to find answers. Some of them are personal questions, others are professional. But I need those answers for myself, as well as to warn about things that have happened and show anomalous behaviors, so that vis-a-vis the future of the Federation, it is necessary for them to be resolved. And of course, and as it's the 4th year and I'm leaving, I'm going to give you, I'll give you a list of what we've all achieved amongst us. First of all, a FAPAE, which is less costly, it's lighter, it's more ductile. And I remember, you probably remember, in January 2014, when I first arrived, I encountered a restructuring process that was awaiting me. The FAPAE budgets were still to be approved, and there wasn't enough revenue in order to cover that budget. Ejeda, who's the great financier of FAPAE, demanded that I carry out a restructuring of FAPAE. It was only possible with getting rid of a lot of personnel and demand the indemnifications that were foreseen in their contracts. But the truth is, they asked me to set up a general secretariat, and as always happens in these cases, the opinions were divided, and I asked 3 presidents what they were thinking, what they thought about the restructuring of the staff at FAPAE. One president said, under no concept should this be done. The other one said, I should do what I believed most convenient. And the third, that what was I waiting to do so? This latter, the toughest vis-a-vis the staff, was the first who recriminated me that we had fired these people. And I was left alone. We we turned the salary issue around, and FAPAE is much lighter. It's much more in tune with these crisis years and approaching and focusing on new objectives. 4 years later, I'm still being recriminated for the restructuring process that I implemented. But I've been able to see the 100 faces that many people have in their personality, and I've asked myself why. Those that have most criticized us are those that less criticize themselves. So therefore, during these 4 years, and thanks to the restructuring process we carried out back then, I would like to say that we've reduced by 40% the expenses, personnel or staff expenses. The current expenses between 25 and 30%. We've maintained the activities, and in some cases we've increased the service provided to our members and the presence of the entity, national as well as at an international level, when the budget for public aid decreased, relatively speaking. We've explored new ways to seek financing implemented in a business plan or an 2017-2021. It's an integrated business plan which will enable the FAPAE structure to be maintain itself and will bring about a balance sheet vis-a-vis costs and to be able to address some of the debts that it has inherited over the years. But there's even more. You don't have to know this, obviously. But thanks to the agreement that we signed between FAPAE and EGEDA, no FAPAE member pays no fee. That is to say, a journalist who's in the Association of the Press in Madrid pays 50 euros as a monthly fee, and this person has a right to a series of things in FAPAE. Producers that are members of FAPAE pay not a single euro to FAPAE, and they have all the services provided for them. FAPAE started up 25 years ago in 1991, and since then it is in charge of representing and defending the professional interests and business interests of the audiovisual production sector. It does this for all types of, vis-a-vis all types of people, private and public entities, and especially before the administration. We defend the interests of the audiovisual producers in the ICX, the EGEDA, in the Spanish Coalition for Cultural Diversities, in the SGR, in the patronage of the Media Desk Foundation, in the audiovisual cluster of the Community of Madrid, in the FIAP, the International Federation, the FIPCA, the Ibero-American Federation, and the EPAA, the Alliance of Associations of European Producers. However, we're going over what we've achieved, and I must remind you that in the first year, as soon as I arrived, the government had foreseen a non-payment to producers of 40 million euros. A producer said, it's either they pay or I've got to close down, I've got to close shop. FAPAE with me at the head, and I'm very proud, with José Antonio Félez as the president of AEC and José Portela as the vice deputy president of FAPAE. We managed from Minister Wert to renegotiate everything and to pay the amounts that had been foreseen. The total figure was far from what the industry had requested, but at the end everything was paid, and no producer had to close down their business. And above all, we started up a tradition that continues nowadays, and I hope in the next year will continue as well. We've managed a greater legal security. You will probably remember of that period when we got together in the mixed commission. It seemed that that would never came to an end, and we had to define the new model for financing of film and audiovisual sector. I remember a panel that I couldn't believe that I was in, and where there were representatives of the government presidency, the Minister for Education and Culture, the Secretary of State for Culture, the Ministry for Industry, Energy, Economy and Competitiveness, the Tax, the Internal Revenue Department, and on our behalf, we were producers, exhibitors, distributors, public and private televisions, and we wanted to work in 4 main areas, in 4 different subcommissions: fiscal incentives, direct aid, new business models, and investment in cinema on behalf of the televisions, by the televisions. Well, for better or for worse, we managed to achieve all that. This is the enforced regulation as it stands at the present moment, and the producers they can't buy tickets, nor can they. The system is much more objective. It is true that there are a few black spots which have been identified that we have to overcome and solve. ICAA knows them as well as we do, and we have to resolve them. But over these 4 years, we've done even more. We have managed to achieve the new regulations of the recognition of production costs vis-a-vis problems for the concession and the grants, and then the computation of spectators, the ICAA, the improvement in fiscal incentives, private copies, the intellectual property, the law, films shot in different languages apart from Spanish, and I'm not talking about the co-official languages. We could make a longer list. I would also, now that I see Ramon Mas Llorens, who have also participated, associations that are not in FAPAE, such as that specific case of PROA, in which we were able to go to a panel with common positions in mind and defend these positions of ours. We set up the new template for the new audiovisual budget, which was one of those Herculean job that it never seemed to come to an end, or never seemed to be finished. And then we were met with the Ministry for Industry, with the General Subdirection of Content Matter, with the issue of the 5%. And we've tried and managed to achieve a whole series of things. But I would like, and to be fair and just, is to add something that has happened in these times, and that is thanks to the FAPAE, thanks to its General Secretariat, Mabel Clint, we have a sentence of the Constitutional Court upon the 5% of compulsory investment. And that is very important, because finally we can listen to Paolo Basile for many reasons, but not because of the issue of the 5%. Okay? Parallel to this, as it should be, I believe we've worked with public channels and chains, and we've signed a truce with the private channels and with their employers, as cannot be the other. We've also been spokesperson with the CNMT. We have resolved certain problems, not all of them, for examples, of the IAEs. And there's something that it seems that's very important for me, it seems, and which I'm very proud of, that I say we've managed to achieve a certain unity in the audiovisual, the Spanish audiovisual culture. Whereas where up until a little while ago, people, the right and the left wing were pulling their hair out, the center were pulling their hair out. When one side said one thing, the others said all the contrary. Now, and there's a common playing field where we don't discuss certain principles, and however, we're trying to find common solutions is what we try to achieve. And that is where the drop in VAT, thanks to the attitude of the PP, Ciudadanos, the Socialist Party, PSOE, and many more. There was an invitation so that the president of the FAPAE could go to Congress to present the problems of the audiovisual industry. We were invited by the PP and other political parties. And also for the first time, we had been invited to, all Spanish producers had been invited so that they could see what the Congress is and to discuss the situation of audiovisual producers. It was an invitation of the person in charge of the Commission by the PP in the Commission for Culture within the Congress, Maria José García Pelayo, and was not carried out for a variety of reasons, but 4 years ago FAPAE had decided to finish and with an important area, and that is to say internationalization. We reverted these initiatives. We went back to the FAPE in a very active way, and in the same way that we can't understand the European Union without Spain, I think that we can't understand the FAPE without FAPAE and without the FIPCA. And also in the FIPCA, we also had to be there represented. As I say, we have to have one foot in Europe, in the European Union, and another foot in Latin America. We have provided support to the main markets throughout the world so that the Spanish producers could go and sell and buy products. And we have put our foot in the markets in Malaga, which is inherited from the market in Madrid and the Seville television market. But I'm not going to continue because I'm not going to bore you because I've been speaking for too long already. I don't want to bore you, but I could also explain what I've not managed to achieve. We've not managed to achieve more money to increase the ICA budgets. This morning I was talking with the director of the ICAA to resolve the problem that he has for 2018. And there's something that I really feel is that I've increased the social peace, shall we say, within FAPAE. Hate and rancor, intrigues, imposition, I found them at many moments in time. I've lived through conspiring moments and conspiration. Secretary General, with whom I tried to set up a team, was one of the problems that I encountered. She didn't pay respect to the president, but to her friends and her clients. And when she decided to leave FAPAE, she manifested quite clearly what happens in FAPAE. I will explain it because I'm going to burn everything I have, but I'm going to tell you everything, but I'm going to keep something in the chamber. But on the 31st of May last, we had a board meeting, and it was pre-cooked by the opposition, as in many, many other occasions. The poison overwhelmed and went over the edge of the glass, and one of my opposers, not a loyal opposition like in other countries, asked for the floor and lliterally told me to go and leave because you were a person that shouldn't be there, and you had to leave. I thought it wasn't a good idea, but I answered him literally that I wasn't going to leave my position and that the elections were just around the corner. That gentleman threatened me with asking for a motion to be passed. To a certain extent, and they had added a clause in the bylaws to the president of the association. He could be removed, or he could be a motion, which is, it's like a censorship motion, could be passed. But this had been done, and they forgot to say how to implement that, what they call remotion, or pass this motion against me. And in that board meeting that was held at the Cinema Academy, I remember the image of Suarez and Gutierrez Mellado in the Congress after the entry of Lieutenant Colonel Tejero. I felt humiliated. I felt spat at almost. But all of this was nothing with regards to what my colleagues had lived through before the board meeting and what they lived through after that board meeting. They lost control. In order to justify their objective was to try to take power within the federation. Perhaps I should have taken on what the Secretary General of the board said 4 years, Miguel Ángel Baladejo, who, as soon as I started, said, Ramon, they don't want you here. Not all of the producers on the board thought the same thing. I felt the comfort and the encouragement of part of the producers who were there and who defended, or at least they felt ashamed of what they saw there on the day. The FAPAE bylaws are surreal, and that is to say the deputy president is not elected, neither does he represent himself as a team like the president. His function is that of controlling the president, not to help him, not to work together at all, but to control the president and what he does. And the last deputy president, whose maximum mandate was 4 years, had already spent 6 years there. There weren't any elections foreseen, and neither in the FAPAE archives were there any minutes upon how he was elected. We knew he had been elected, I'm not too sure, by votation or just placed there and named and put there. It seems, and not always, apart from certain exceptions where there had been elections. One of the ways they liked in FAPAE, not every time, not always, I must insist, was to sit down the night before and to see who was going to preside the board meeting. But the day I had to go through that board meeting where I was told to leave, that illustrated person, so to speak, said that they were not going to do any elections because the elections divided the personnel. They confronted them, and that they would decide who would sit down in my position as a president. Today, from the 31st of May until today, the end of September, I must say that they didn't manage to achieve their objective. Elections have been summoned. There's an electoral committee. There is a calendar. I fulfilled what I had said and the basic principle of democracy, that is to say, for everyone to vote. I don't like tumultuous situations. I don't like lies, and above all, in order to take away the prestige of everyone. And I went through all of those lies, and I've been told about those lies that were said about me. We are, and all of you know that, we are in a period of transparency. We are living in transparency, and I would add that thank God that such is the case. There's a magnificent slogan of the Washington Post which has just come to mind when I was writing these lines. The slogan says, democracy finishes in the dark. And I want for FAPAE, I want light, I want stenographers, and I want decisions, common decisions. I have been told and asked to leave. This has been done in the right way. I recommend you leave your position. And in the bad way, that is to say, financing was cut off, our financing was cut off. Last month of August, 3 people in FAPAE, in the ugliest shopping mall in Madrid, the one in Pozuelo, El Foco it's called, at the door of a bank, because those who had committed to finance us cut off, switch off the tap. We didn't have the money neither to pay July nor August, that is to say, the salaries of the people who work in the Federation. Now, I must say, and I'm almost about to finish, that it's possible that there won't be any elections, but due to the absence of anyone else participating, the enemies basically just simply are leaving. They prefer, I believe, or that's what I deduce, they prefer to kill FAPAE before presenting themselves to an election process. It seems that they don't want everything that has been achieved in 25 years have continuity. Well, and it also seems that they don't want anything to be known. In the same way that I also believe that in Catalonia, this is the time for dialogue. In FAPAE, it is also time for dialogue. Dialogue, yes, but eliminating the interests that have existed. The members of the FAPAE board, ladies and gentlemen, do not have to have any privileges above the producers that they represent and who are not sitting on the board. I must say that some of my opposers, people that oppose me, have taken full advantage of the situation, and they continue to try to do so. These people who oppose me, it's not there are new opponents against me. The former president, Pedro Pérez, told me they were the same opponents that were bothering him and hassling him. Now is when I've understood the imposition of a Secretary General, a person who was working more for some producers than for other producers, a person who did more favors to some than to others. And so therefore I ask whether we can call it corruption. And also I must say that our moral references that we have within the industry who are older than us should not allow it, better said. I want to finish by saying something that I think is very important. The economy, as all of you know, is not exact science. The economy, as it works, is the science that gives a privilege to the privileged, and it collapses those people who are already collapsed. The enforced regulation, and that's what we were talking about, you know where the black points are, and the ICAA knows it, and we have to fix this up if we can. It gives privilege to those that are already privileged. Some can shoot up to even 3 films a year, and it doesn't allow others to come above the surface. That is why there's a growing imbalance here. I would like to say to all of you, especially to those that have a lot more power than others that do exist in our industry, that the important thing is not only your balance sheet or profit and loss account, but equal opportunities. We've got a problem, and the problem is that some people work a lot and others don't work at all. So therefore, we've got to try to manage to rebalance that situation. I am now making a call through all of you to all of the professionals in the film world and the production sector, whether they're in the production sector or not. There is a will of closing FAPAE down. Don't allow that to happen. The industry needs a spokesperson. We need for the industry and the different sectors to be able to come to agreements. Don't allow anyone to manipulate industrial movements. And the presidents of the associations of throughout Spain, when they have to confront themselves, confront their members, to look at them in the eyes and to tell them why they align with certain associations and not others. They should discuss it in their own territorial board meetings. No, please, no more dinners, no more conspiring, no more intrigue, where we can only hear the same voices but not the voices of others. Before, and I'm going to finish, and as it's my last speech, I know that you've got to ask questions. I want to thank to a whole series of people, Susana de la Sierra, who was the first director of the ICAA, Lorena González Olivares, who I appreciate very much. She had to put up with a lot, just like I did. Oscar Grafelheim, Jose Maria Lasalle, who was hated, I don't know, depending on who hated him, I don't know. Fernando Benzo, the President, Secretary for Culture, to the two ministers, Jose Ignacio Bert and Méndez de Vilu, to two lawyers that you don't know, Carlos Martín and Miguel Ángel Albaradejo, of Antena 3, Miquel Lejarza and Mauricio Carlotti, in Mediaset, Aguilar Barrois, Paulo Basile, and RTVE, the two presidents of the corporation, the last one being Jose Antonio Sanchez, to the current director of TVE, and the previous ones, and someone who has been a link, like a nexus, who is Fernando López Puig. I want to thank those of you who voted me when I was elected, because I was elected, albeit they maybe complained later and left me to one side. But I must insist in my request, please don't allow FAPAE to come to an end. We need FAPAE, but above all, you need FAPAE. And don't forget, and as the Washington Post says, democracy, let's not allow democracy to end in the dark. That's it. Questions, please. You probably observed that I've not mentioned any names, but I want to keep that for me. Well, as you said, who conspires and who's committing the intrigue? I'm sorry, we can't hear the question from the audience. No, not at all. I don't think so. I believe if they were here, perhaps they could defend each other. They would scream, and they would probably say no. But it's a journalistic exercise for good journalists like you that you can try and find out who's who. But there are a lot of witnesses and testimonies, and I prefer because as I've had a hard time when I've not been here, especially when I've never been somewhere. When I was present, they didn't say that to my face. I would not like to do the same thing. Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon. Mr. Colom, what's the situation of FAPAE? You're leaving FAPAE or just leaving the presidency? Or how is the body? Well, the body ends up, let's say, it will following these surreal bylaws, or statutes. It has been called, and we've made a summons. The electoral committee of FAPAE has been summoned. That electoral committee will take control of everything that has to do with the elections, the election processes, and the president. In this specific case, I've become president meanwhile, okay? So I'll be there until the day that there is a new president to whom I will hand over these supposed powers as president of the FAPAE. There's a timetable of what's going to happen as of now. We have to submit candidates. The candidates have to submit electoral program. I would have liked for there to be a certain discussion or electoral debate, so that people could explain, the candidates could explain what they want to do, why, and how they see each and every one of the different things that we do, and we will come to the voting day. If I don't recall, if I'm not mistaken, the election date was foreseen for the first week in November, about the 7th of November, unless there were any last-minute changes. And because the census has to be done, and we send this to each of the associations, the people voting can disagree with that census or not, and so on and so forth. So therefore, it can't be a closed date. Mr. Colom, is it clear that you're not going to be a president again if there's no candidature? And if there were, if you don't present yourself, do you believe who you would support if someone was the next? Who you'd support as next president? I don't know who can present themselves. I don't know at present. And what I do know is that I don't want to present myself again as president. Well, because above all, I want to be an element of dialogue, and as it seems that everything has been polarized in the surroundings of me, I don't want to be discordant. That is to say, I don't know what's going to happen these next few days. We will see what happens over the coming days. Ramon, hi, good afternoon. And to not get stuck in and to judge by what you've told us, apparently it seems it's an internal power struggle within FAPAE. From your experience over these last 4 years, and from what I see, that everything that you've told us, and because of all of this intrigue that you talked about, I insist going a bit further beyond the structure and the internal operation of how FAPAE works in these years and all of this experience you've acquired. Does it make you personally think that any criticism upon the production industry in Spain vis-a-vis Spanish cinema? That is to say, what's the critique that you have of the producers as regards and the role that producers are playing within the Spanish film industry? I know that one issue is that the films that the producers make, but that's one thing. But another issue could be all of this intrigue that you talked about and things that have gone on. But as inevitably all of these things are mixed together, and you've referred to the fact that some make more films and some can't make any films or do make very little, and that's where probably some people, these are the negative things that the Spanish film industry suffer. Is there any reflection that you can make upon this? Or can you reflect upon this? There's something here which is not new. This is something from the past. There are certain producers that have managed to throw out ICA directors from the ICAA, and you know this, okay? And there is a producer that every time he saw a director of the ICAA, he would threaten that he was going to throw her out because he didn't manage things to be he didn't manage to have things how he wanted. And I think that that we have eaten and not said anything about is intolerable. No matter how nice the producer is or the producers in question, okay? You can't take that on. In second place, this is the 16th of June, Santiago Apostol, for example, there was a meeting in Madrid. I summoned a meeting in Madrid in order to prepare the meeting that we had to hold with the ICAA, talking about those issues that we saw and that we believed that we had to talk about. An association decided to not turn up to the meeting. They had the right to do so too, by the way, and neither did they tell us that they weren't going to turn up, and so on. Another association told me but I was told that you are we don't have to pay too much attention to you because you're on the way out. And another association where theoretically there is quote unquote an enemy of mine and with whom I get along very well, we coincided in two things. Or we agreed upon two things, and that's why I'm going to mention her name. I'm going to use one of her arguments. She said, well, okay, it's true, the film, there's something that makes me very nervous, and that is to say, yesterday, or a few days back, in a meeting with producers, instead of telling me about the project, they were telling me about the number of points they had in order to achieve the ICAA aid, and that's perversion, really. And it's true, it's perverse. It's a very perverse way of doing things. And she would add the following argument, to which we all agreed. We said, yes, it is true that the film industry is getting better, that we have more revenues, there's a good image, and so on. And she said, yes, but tell me what films in 2017 will go into the history of cinema. Verano 1993, summer of 1993 had not been premiered yet, though. And this is what we've also got to ask ourselves. Not only whether the industry is operating well and where revenues and the profit and loss account and so on and so forth. And we know they know that in the ICAA, and we know that as well. And that, certain producers don't like that. And they want to control the way things are going from a legislative standpoint or regulatory standpoint. FAPAE has the great advantage that it gets the large producers and small producers and brings them together. It brings together the TV producers. It brings together the advertising producers. We had foreseen in the future, in a little while, the virtual reality producers were going to be included. Not only the best of the best in the film world, and it's good for everyone to talk to each other. It's very good for decisions to be made amongst everybody. And that is the great advantage that FAPAE has, and not because there's a president who I don't like and he doesn't do what I want him to do, I'm leaving. That's very egotistic. Egoism, absolutely. It's very selfish, and I'm leaving, and that's why it says, as I'm the problem, I don't want to cause any more problems. What's quite clear to me is that how the internal distribution of favors takes place. But let's leave that, because we would have to go further in depth. And I'm also going to say something. The majority of the Spanish producers, or practically all of them, are clean. So therefore, it makes no sense that 3 or 4 or a dozen of them complicate the situation of the audiovisual industry even more so. Sorry, we can't hear the question from the audience. There's no microphone. Hi, good afternoon. I say my name because I'm not well known, but I would like Rego Mas Llorens, president of PROA. Thank you very much for Ramon for having mentioned me before, but it's a federation, it's not an association of associations who work for the audiovisual world at a state level. I didn't want to ask for the floor because it's the day of FAPAE, but with all of the affection that we have personally, Ramon, which is a lot on my behalf, you know that because I've said this on many repeated occasions, I want to make clear that I think that you've made an enormous mistake in leaving this way, because in a moment as the present moment, which is a very complicated moment for the film industry, a very complicated moment for producers, then more than ever, I believe, and I believe this firmly, that we have to be united. The message that you're conveying in FAPAE, because PROMA left FAPAE 2 years ago, so I think is a mistake. It's a strategic mistake, which is very important. And having said this, perhaps I may agree in many of the things that you said, because we've been in FAPAE together and because we live, the first 2 we lived it together, and perhaps that's why we left. But perhaps the best way is to leave when you're in time, but not leave in this way, Ramon. The sector that we created, and we created this way when read the newspaper tomorrow with everything that's been said here today, that we've got to row against the stream you can't even imagine. Tomorrow we will have to row twice as hard, and in the coming months. I just wanted to say this within all the personal affection I have for you. Okay, I think you've made a mistake. I'm sorry, we can't hear what they're saying. Thank you very much, Raymond. Thank you very much for what you've said. I've borne in mind what I was going to say quite often. I could have left with my tail between my legs. But I can also say that what you're asking me, some people who are interested in me not saying anything told me to not say anything and not to say, and I'm just sick and tired. So I had to say something. I'm sorry we can't hear any more questions. No microphone. Well, okay, with all of these problems that have been between FAPAE and the results of Spanish film are much better than what they were. There's more films on the screens. Films are more successful. I'd like to know whether you could assess or give us an idea of what the sector's like, because from what I'm seeing is that there are some films that are being very successful, and it seems they are the ones that are moving everything, but whether there's been difficulties for the smaller type films in order to find some room and some film theaters to be seen so they could see the films. Could you address, are we going towards a rich film that works very well, and a film with very modest budgets, which is eternally condemned to suffer in order to succeed? Juan, I've assessed this every year, because I think that since I arrived in 2014, there's a takeoff of Spanish film, and I say it's thanks to Spanish TV channels, and also thanks to commercial films that we didn't used to make, and those films, all of a sudden, the spectators and the audience are starting to see them. I think that the best thing vis-a-vis Spanish filmmaking is the change in how it's perceived. That has taken place, the change that Spanish film is worthwhile, that not all of them are films about the Civil War, which was another fallacy which was used against Spanish films. But I believe that that work exists, and it's collective work of the entire industry, not only of the producers, but also of the distributors and exhibitors. And that is why there's been an increase of films on these TV screens. Everything has improved, and that's the positive side, shall we say, of this last 4 years. I haven't said this because I didn't want anyone to say that, but you get involved into everything, including that, which is a collective effort. And just like in previous years, I'd already mentioned it, I didn't dare to say it this time. Among one of the accusations that you've mentioned is the word of corruption on a Secretary General. I'm not too sure what her position was. My question is, why do you say it now that you're the president until the next elections and not in these 4 years where you've had margin to fire her or whatever? I don't understand why the moment is now, and in these 4 years what has happened. Whether there's that shadow of corruption. No, I've asked. I didn't say that there was corruption. To what extent that's corruption or not? Yes, it's a question that yes, but as a president with people who are under you, I don't know. I'm asking you about why you're saying it now and whether there's that threat. Well, because things aren't discovered never on the first day, but slowly but surely you see as time goes by things that seem to you to be a bit anomalous. I'm not saying that it's corruption. I insist so that this is quite clear, okay? I'm just saying these are anomalous ways of operating that I'm just basically bringing to the table. Mr. Colom, with everything that has been said, I'm a bit sad and a bit moved, but I would have loved to say the opposite. That would have been much more beautiful. But let's be optimistic, because you were talking about dialogue. You repeated dialogue. But let's get in the following scenario. The people that get together to conspire against you, they leave. Can we find any way to dialogue? Upon what points? What would be the points that we have to maintain this dialogue? And what would be, according to you, the way in which this possible, and I think catastrophe, that FAPAE may disappear, can be avoided? What could we do? Let's imagine that instead of now the people that go, well, okay, well, let's maintain a dialogue. I have been called for bankruptcy in FAPAE. When I'm saying something's happening, something is happening, okay? And I think bankruptcy is the last thing that should be done, we should come to. Well, second, when I say dialogue, is that there are things that have not been talked about. That is to say, there are members of the FAPAE board that have been there 8 or 10 years, and there they are. And we have to resolve another thing, which is more than direct democracy. I'm sorry to say it in that political sense. That is to say, it can't be that the members and the producers from all over Spain don't know what FAPAE is doing, don't even come to the FAPAE, because if they're lucky, the president of their association will go to FAPAE, and when he comes back to his own territory, he will tell them the story in the next meeting, what's happening at FAPAE's meeting, if they're lucky. We have found, and not a little while back, that some producers will ask you, what do you do? What are you useful for? Lunches, dinners? No. We work, and we work a lot, and above all, you have to think a lot as well. The great advantage that FAPAE has, for me, for a president, is that it enables you to work in a horizon of 2 or 3 years further on, what the industry will be like, what's going to happen, what's going to exist, albeit it's true that in our country, in some communities, the decisions are made almost every 6 months. But we have to talk. Why do we have to talk? Well, because I want, and even the associations that have left, to come back and sit down and to talk about what should be done in the immediate future or in the near future. The FAPAE people in Brussels ask us, what do you think about this? Well, we don't think about this. What do you mean you don't think about it? No, we don't think about this because there's nobody now who thinks about this. Okay? This, I'm not too sure whether I've answered you. 50-50. I think that we have to sit down truly, not because I'm to use the word dialogue. I think that those that are interested, the stakeholders, it's the industry in general. I always say that FAPAE theoretically is a confederation of producers, but the producers, in a certain extent, are a summary, or are the beginning, are the driving force of the industry. So therefore, it is true that in FAPAE there aren't any screenplay writers or script writers, but the work of the script writers, they are in AMA and they are in SGAE, but they will depend upon what the producers of FAPAE do, so therefore the links aren't that short at all in almost any of the cases. Okay, sorry to ask you again. Mr. Colom, in your press conference, what you've seen in FAPAE surprised you, and it seems so strange that coming from Pro as you come, you're surprised at what you found in FAPAE. When, for example, just to give you an idea, the box office fraud started a bit earlier. No, don't say that's my fault as well. No, that already existed beforehand. That is to say, what you find in FAPAE, I imagine that you knew what was there, or you were truly surprised when you took the presidency in FAPAE when you were there. I think that those files of the corruption in the box office has more to do with the distributors than the producers per se. This doesn't mean that the producers or certain producers, Spanish producers, it doesn't affect them, and it is true that it does. But there are things that obviously you discover. For example, in July 2017, I saw something that happened in 2013. Well, okay, that happens practically, I would say, everywhere or in many places, and that we have to bear that in mind and should be taken into account. It's easy sometimes to think that you know everything and you find everything in files, or in the archives. We in FAPAE had to reconstruct certain files, and I can assure you that it was almost madness to do it, and we did it. I want to clear up one thing different to. It may have seemed more lament than what it really is. No, I don't regret it. I say that's what the situation is, and I would like that FAPAE should continue to survive, and that everything I can do to help, I will do. Any further questions? No? No? Okay, well, thank you very much to all of you.